All right, everyone, welcome to Soapbox Theology. This is Pastor Gabe. Today we're going to be finishing up chapter 1 of the book of James, and it's just 2 verses that we're looking at this time. So I will read them as we begin. It says this, verse 26, "If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world." So, concluding this first chapter, he began with warning them and encouraging them in their time of testing. As they are spread out and they're being persecuted, he reminded them of the temptation and the challenge of going to be entering into sin during the temptations and during those trials. He then also tells them to listen to the Word of God, essentially telling them to listen to what he's saying ultimately, but listen to the Word of God, read the Word of God, reflect the Word of God, but put it into action. Put it into action. And so then he kind of wraps up this chapter then by saying, right after telling them what they are to do, he then reminds them. And it makes you think if there was perhaps people thinking that they were pretty religious, that they were doing a good job, perhaps they weren't doing many of the things on this list, but in general they thought they were, decent religious people, and perhaps we have some people like that. Although today in modern Christianity, more of us would be likely to kind of push away from the charge of religion. I'm not. It's not a religion. It's a relationship, right? But the truth is, Christianity, of course, is a religion. Religion just means the tradition that surrounds the worship and the devotion of God, and so religion. There's nothing wrong with religion in general. It's just the practices and the fundamentals and the traditions that a particular faith has. And Christianity, of course, is a religion. And this is a reminder, though, that if anyone thinks that he is religious, but he doesn't control his tongue, he deceives himself. And this says he actually deceives his heart. And so this is actually very similar to what it was just saying. The above portion, it's saying, in a similar manner, the same way that you read the Word of God and you don't put it into practice, you're deceiving yourselves, right? You think it's great that you read the Word of God, and it's good to do that, and you certainly should read the Word of God, and I read the Word of God, but if we're not actually taking that and putting it down into us, inside of our hearts, in this would be kind of the application, right, into our deeper parts, into our hearts, into our minds, and in other words, if it's not getting inside of us, if it's not becoming a part of who we are, if we aren't doing that, we're deceiving ourselves. And in the same way, he's saying, if you're not implanting the Word of God inside yourselves, the same way, if you think you're religious, if you think that you're doing certain good things that are making you a good religious person, perhaps I attend services and I give to the church, and whatever it might be that people do to think that they're good religious people, he's saying that actually the true religious aspect of Christianity is caring for widows and orphans. Widows and orphans. It's those people that are in need. And this is a big deal. And it's not just, a lot of us will say, well, yeah, it's anyone who's struggling. Actually, the New Testament is pretty clear. Make sure a widow is actually a widow. Make sure she actually doesn't have anyone to rely upon. Paul talks about this when he's talking about the distribution to the widows, and he says make sure they're actually widows, because there might come a time, if he says if they're still really young, they should just get remarried rather than be those that are become reliant upon the church. In other words, if you can get remarried, if you can get back out there and get married and have someone to take care of you and establish a family, then do that. But if you really are in a position where you have nothing, and that's what this is talking about, you have nothing, you have no options. That's what a true widow is, and again, that's what an orphan is, especially back in this day. They wouldn't have had the orphanage system that we have today. But in other words, people that are truly in need and can go to no other one, those are the people that are to be looking to the church. And that is the primary, religious duty of the church, is to be looking after people in that situation. Beyond that, the Christianity encourages people, go get a job. If you don't work, you won't eat. And so be responsible, take responsibility. That's what a lot of this chapter has been about. Don't just say I'm suffering because I don't have a job. Well, it's like, if you're able to get a job, get a job. Go get a job, go take care of yourself. But if you're actually suffering in this area where there isn't anyone to take care of you, that is the responsibility of the church. And so he's pointing it out. He's like, this is our responsibility. So don't say you're religious if you're ignoring people that absolutely cannot do anything for themselves, and then you turn a blind eye. That's, your religion at that point is self-deceived. It's worthless, it says. But then it goes on, religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this: visit orphans and widows. But it's also this: to keep oneself unstained from the world. So again, there's that matter of not only, so these outward things, you care for widows, you care for orphans. We need to be on the lookout for those in our churches that really don't have anyone, that really need help. We need to be helping. That's, your church should have a benevolence fund. Your church should have ministry in these aspects. That's what they should have. They should have all of those things way before they have so many other ministries that we tend to do. Those should be the first things that you're at least able to help with. But then beyond that, there is the matter of keeping oneself unstained from the world. In other words, you're not being careless in sin. You're not being careless and falling and drifting away, following after your temptations, as he's already mentioned above. As we've talked about before, each person is led away when their desires give birth to sin, and it's because of your own temptation. You're not being tempted by God. Don't think that. You're being tempted because you have a sin nature, and each of us have different proclivities that we tend to go towards. Some of us it's lust. Some of us it's substances. Some of us it's gossip, it's comparison, it's lying, it's cheating, it's pride, there's just so many things that it could be. But this is saying, again, if your religion is pure and undefiled before God, you're going to be doing these two things, but you're also going to be making sure you're keeping those short accounts with God. You're going to be making sure that the sin in your life is not growing to be the lifestyle. Sin should always be something that you're struggling with. In other words, that you're struggling against. Not that because it's always going to be there. It shouldn't be something that you don't struggle with. And no big deal. This is just who I am. This is just how God created me. And so you don't struggle with it. You kind of just take it on as a lifestyle. And that's actually the problem with so much of the lifestyle and identity that's taking place in our culture today. People are identifying with their sin, taking it on as lifestyles rather than repudiating it, rather than repenting of it, rather than keeping themselves unstained from the world. And so again, the world's going to do that, but Christians should not be doing that sort of stuff. So James is setting this up. You're going to be persecuted. There's going to be trials. There's going to be testing. You can be made better in these testing. You can come out on top in your suffering. Sin is obviously going to accompany that, but don't give in to sin. Make sure you're relying on God. You're looking to His Word. Make sure you're putting His Word into practice. And make sure the things that you are doing are actually the things that honor God. Make sure the practices that you're practicing are actually those good religious practices that the church should be participating in. So again, don't just kind of make up your own system. Again, this is another problem in the world right now. A lot of people are making up their own system. They've decided what it is to be a good Christian. They've decided what it is to be a good follower of God. They've redefined what God's love is, and so they come up with their own system to appease that system of love. But we are to do these things and not make up additional requirements that are no way that are no way related to what the Word of God says. Again, the few verses before it, read the Word of God, put that into practice, not your own imaginations and ideas. So that's James chapter 1. We made it through several videos, and we'll begin looking at James chapter 2 next time. Thank you. Bye.